everybody, this is Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we continue our discussion on breathing. And I think you guys are looking at what I'm showing you on the screen right now. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So I think we've pretty much worked our way into the main locations on the ChangeGrid to try to see what distinctions, if any, we can make about breathing in different areas. We haven't looked very much on the in-grid side of things, and so I thought it might be interesting to kind of start there. And I do think, just like we found out-grid, there's a difference between being slightly out-grid or moderately out-grid and being in the danger zone. I think similarly, we're going to find that being somewhat in-grid is going to be different than being in the in-grid danger zone. And so for just a moment, I'm going to scroll to the adjective map, the dark side we were looking at, because I want you to see what words are describing. And I don't know if you can see this, see if I can zoom in a little bit. There we go. I want you to see these adjectives in the in-grid danger zone little flap here and see if that helps you to identify any specific characteristics of the breathing you'd encounter there. But the breathing, or rather the adjectives, afraid, timid, wimpy, worried, unsure, introverted, shy, submissive, fragile, subservient, mousy, cowardly, avoiding, at their worst, abused, exploited, oppressed, spineless. You can, or see, you get the vibe of what that in-grid danger zone is all about. Yes, would be tremendously reassuring at this point. Now, I do want to bring something else to your attention before we start talking about specific breathing things. If you guys look at the response state layer of the ChangeGrid, do you see that these 5 wedges will remain proportionately the same no matter where I cut off the overall square? So if instead of saying it goes all the way to 12, 12, what if I said it only goes to 6, 6? So if you look at just the in-grid quadrant, can you see that all 5 levels of tension are present at the exact same ratios that they would be if we looked at the full ChangeGrid?
Yes.
It's just a smaller world. It's not as intense as we'd find going out there. So if I move all the way in to, let's say that my most out-grid moment was a 1, 1. Can you see that inside of that one little square are all 5 levels of tension, all in the right proportions?
Yes.
Yeah, and so that's why I think talking about in-grid is a little bit more challenging, because in-grid danger zone can have aspects of stress, but it can also have aspects of apathy and everything in between. So isn't that weird? We'll just call it curious and see what we can come up with it. And so I go like, well, if I'm in the in-grid danger zone and I'm feeling in any way threatened and I'm being triggered to be timid and feeling, cowardly, feeling mousy, how does that affect your postures? And in turn, how does that affect your breathing? So we seem to have defaulted. We didn't deliberately put these here, but shallow, fast, and chest seems to be what has ended up there. Do you guys, can you make any sense of that situation and the breathing that we've just described? You're all unmuted, so feel free to chime in.
When you are in that area, you would probably be kind of drawn in, hunched over, just making yourself physically smaller, and so you'd be more likely to take shallow, upper chest breathing.
And I'm thinking it would probably be fast, because there feels like there's a threat of some sort.
I think so. Fast.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, again, I don't know that if we were going to measure fast on a speedometer, I don't really know that it's as fast as someone who's in the upgrade danger zone, who's truly in a fight or flight response. But remember, we have those other 2 survival mechanisms, so fade and freeze. And I really believe that the in-grid person wants to fade. I mean, they're already barely visible when you're that far in-grid, right? We talk about just overall, when you put an in-grid person, or even take some of the personality typing systems, when you take an amiable person and put them in a room with an expressive driver and an analytical, are we expecting the amiable to be the life of the party?
No.
No. If anything, we expect them to become a bit of a wallflower. And me, I would kind of want to go like, we got to get them involved. Let's introduce them to somebody. They're not having a good, so there's this energy that just says, I recognize that this person is very hesitant to get involved. We need to go and help them kind of get involved. So I bring that up just to say, I think that even under the most non-threatening of circumstances, they do not make themselves as visible as the other three might. And I'm not suggesting that an analytical is going to make themselves all that visible until they're engaged in an intellectual dialogue. And then who knows how quickly they could become the leading authority, but that in-grid person isn't particularly visible. And so my thought is that when they feel less and less comfortable, they work deliberately or unconsciously to become less and less visible. So sooner or later, they disappear. They blend in, they fade. So does that feel right to you guys?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is interesting because, we've been talking about this idea of the mind-body connection. And I know Jane and Kathy talk about the somatic. And, we just finished the neurotransmitters. And you got to keep in mind the central nervous system network controls respiration. It's a complex array of neurons stretching down from the cortex all the way down to the lower thoracic and upper lumbar spinal cord.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about posture and just how you shrink the body, that alone will impact your breathing.
Yeah.
But also that mental aspect of things, like how you're perceiving some kind of event, those will impact your breathing. So, that brings back all these neurons, neural connections that we've been talking about. So it's very fascinating to hear that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because when we look at our neurotransmitter plottings, the only neurotransmitter that seems to have landed in that in-grid danger zone was there's a lot of dopamine. I don't know what the reward there is, but maybe if I was an in-grid danger zone person, if I was in that situation, just seeing another day is kind of reward enough. And so I'll kind of, just count whatever blessings I can. It just doesn't feel like it's if I'm going to have a dopamine experience, it doesn't seem like the one I'd like to have. So
yeah. But you can trick your mind into that, because remember,
Yeah.
dopamine deals with motivation and also the anticipation, and there's something known as the dopamine prediction error reward. And so when you're thinking about this, hey, I'm gonna stave off from this, or I'm going to disconnect, I'm going to disengage.
Someday I'll escape. Yeah, I'm going to escape from all this. Yeah, interesting.
Or I
Okay.
can make it, I can do it whenever, some condition is met. Those are tricks of the mind, really, that you trick yourself into a funk, if you will, position to where you're digging a deeper hole.
Yeah, interesting. Well, because as I look at other corners, all right, if we look at what's going on upgrid, so snorting, shallow, fast, what we kind of get what's going on up there. It's more chest breathing, and then outgrid, fast chest breathing, whatever. Well, that's where the adrenaline would be kicking in. And so to me, when I think about, okay, Linda's allergic to everything under the sun, and we've been in the emergency room more than once, and here's her EpiPen. Well, I know what that EpiPen does to her breathing rate within like a second or two. And suddenly she's like, it's changed dramatically. So I can kind of see that maps very well to that. So I was going like, all right, well, at a certain point, there has to be a connection between neurochemical activity in the brain and how your breathing is affected. So, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, okay. So, all right. So I think that this idea about breathing shallowly makes sense if they're feeling that level of threat. Well, I think almost just by physical um, reality, the more compressed your chest is, the faster you almost have to breathe if you are feeling any kind of a threat, because you're not getting any volume.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's to keep your breathing in equilibrium. And I missed last week, so I don't know what you said about sighing, but
No.
sighing is something that happens. It's the way that your body increases the functional residual capacity. So if you're breathing shallowly for very long, every so often you'll sigh, and
Yeah.
people sigh anyway. You know, on a regular basis, either sighing or yawning, because otherwise you get too much collapsing of those small airways.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In fact, we were talking about that sighing is a cleansing
Yeah.
activity, because you know, you don't do it really consciously. We were also talking about that sighing can be communicating emotion. So sometimes people just go,
Yeah, unintentional.
right. So whatever. So it can be tied to certain emotions, but we kind of put sighing more as a maneuver. And it's in red because I don't think that someone who is upgrid or someone who has thrown their what do you call it? I used to know what you call the relation between gases in your, so your blood gases, your whatever. Anyway, your the gases are out of whack, and so the lungs just want to go, let's cleanse and start over. And so sometimes a downgrade maneuver is being done automatically by your body, as opposed to the conversational downgrade maneuvers we normally look at. So we kind of put sighing into that category too, rather than being a characteristic of an area, more of a characteristic of movement.
But,
Yep.
oh, okay, it's a characteristic of movement. I'm wondering in power apathy, when you get to the point where you know, I'm imagining somebody saying, "Oh, do I have to do this? Isn't there someone else?"
Yeah. Yeah, that we might find. See, when I was thinking about that too, we've been looking at the danger zones, but what are these in-betweens all about? And I know that when I am in my analytical mode, I'm not this far downgrade. I'm not in a danger zone. You know, I mean, I'm
This is
figuring
me
something
when
out.
I look at a sink full of dishes and I thought, "Oh, is it my turn?"
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Which is right over here, where the whole we say that
Where
in
are those
power apps.
elves when I need them?
Yeah, you want to delegate. I know I need to do this. Can someone else please do this? So,
I
so
just, so anytime you have shallow breathing, you're going to have sighing it's a functional, physiological thing, because what's happening when you've got shallow breathing is the air sacs, the alveoli collapse in your lungs because they're not being expanded with the tidal capacity of your normal breathing, and that's called the functional residual capacity of your lungs. And so every so often, you're physiologically, just to keep those deep alveoli open, you do these physiological, you do this sighing, which is an expanded breath. So wherever you see shallow breathing, you're probably going to have some sighing every so often.
and when you sigh, then would you say that that's lowering your tension, raising your tension, or having no effect really whatsoever on whatever's going on in the moment? All the above.
It probably would lower your tension because
I
it's going
think,
to
yeah.
rebalance. It's
Yeah.
going to rebalance your respiratory function a little bit, but then if you just go back to that rapid, shallow breathing, the hyperventilating and things like that.
Right. And so again, I think it's kind of more like the body's own downgrade maneuver.
It is, yeah.
And it has a mechanical reason. That's not really fair. A chemical reason,
Functional
a
reason.
functional reason for doing it, as opposed to it being a characteristic of where you are on the change grid.
Mhm.
So yeah, because we're kind of going like, this was the whole goal. I don't know if you were on the call when I said that. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could determine at least the general vicinity of where someone is on the change grid using absolutely nothing but hearing them breathe? So if that was the only information we had, would we be able to at least figure out a general area where someone might be plotting on the change grid?
And what
And
do you think?
that certain things very easily. Other things don't really know. And I think it's because we've never really paid attention to breath as the only piece of information we have available to us. So it might just be about exercising our ability to process that input in a more useful way, more in an expanded sort of way. Like, for example, I said that if all we did was we heard the sound of a baby sleeping, we know what it sounds, what someone sleeping sounds like, particularly if they're making any, if it's a louder breath, and if they're snoring, then it's a dead giveaway, of course. But so we go like, no, that I could recognize. Or if I recognize that someone was doing, actually, this is a little quiz question I had for you guys. If you take a breath, a partial breath, and before you expel that breath fully, you take another partial breath on top of it, and another partial breath on top of that one, and another partial breath on top of that one. And you do this 3, 4, 5, 6 times before you're actually at full capacity. And then you release all of that air all at once. What emotion do you think that would be? So the best way for you guys to answer that question is for you to do the breathing pattern I just mentioned. Do it 2 or 3 times. So take a breath, and then let it all go, and tell me what. Any thoughts?
I think it's got a calming effect. And I think this is one of the ways that you breathe when you're in pain.
Very good. Thank you. Okay.
I have a recent experience of that. So
Yeah.
my wrist. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that is a breathing pattern that's associated with pain if the space between the breaths is longer rather than shorter. If they're quick breaths on top of each other, that's the breathing pattern for anger.
Hmm.
So, and we've always said anger and pain walk hand in hand. So, not surprising to find that the breathing pattern would be very similar. So now the theory would be that if you just duplicated that rather quick partial inhale, then another one on top, another one on top, another one on top, you can do a little exhale in between. So it's and then you end up with your lungs full, and then you let it all go. If you do that 3 or 4 times, you start having angry thoughts. So now, they say that there is a similar pattern that is the pattern that's associated, the opposite pattern is associated with this. So if I said you take a really, really, really big breath and then you let it out in partial spurts. So big breath. What emotion do you think that is associated with? Big inhale, sporadic exhale. And again, we're not talking about anyone who has any kind of like a physiological issue going on. This is just an otherwise normal person. So we can just look at emotional breathing. What do you think? Big inhale.
Just heard somebody teach that about a month ago.
Big inhale. Okay. There are 2 main things that come up, and talk about dependent on context. It is. That is the breathing pattern associated with crying.
Oh, yeah.
It's also the breathing pattern associated with laughing. So when you're having a good laugh, think about what you do. You take a deep breath and then, which is this quick, rapid release of partial breath. And similarly, when you're crying, it's so it is contextual, but the pattern is similar.
You know where I heard that before, T? I now remember where I heard that. Zen Buddhism. The laughter breath of creating that sense of, you know, how Zen does a whole thing with laughter.
Yep.
And I think that's, I associate that with the Zen Buddhist breathing pattern, as a conscious Zen Buddhist breathing pattern.
And I think that also is where we learned that the emotions or the memories attached with emotions that could come up during that breathing pattern could be laughter, it could be happiness, it could be sadness, it could be laughter, it could be crying, because we don't know what content is going to be triggered, what memory content is going to be brought up by that pattern. But I do know that if I say to you, I'd like you to look down, and I'd like you to have your eyes closed, and I want you to duplicate that pattern, versus saying, I want your shoulders back and your head up, looking up to the sky, now duplicate that pattern. We can kind of steer it from a happy thought, looking up, to a sad thought, looking down. And people say this, I laughed so hard I cried. So yeah, so I think this is an interesting kind of thing to sort of put together. But I bring that up only to say that certain unique patterns can tell us where people are on the change grid, because I said, where on the change grid do people laugh? And I mean a good, hearty, a real laugh. Where do you think we laugh? Power? Do people?
But more up-grid.
That's kind of like would that be a nervous laughter as opposed to a good belly release? Because what I'm describing here is that kind of deep laughter, really, really strong laughter, is more of an up or down grid maneuver. What do you think?
What the down grid maneuver, if when you use it.
Yeah, because we often call it comic what?
Relief.
Comic relief. It allows us to break the tension, to let that stored energy or that built up energy out. And obviously, if I'm building up physical energy, if I'm getting increasingly tight in my muscles, that's going to impact my breathing. And so, as you've all said multiple times on each call, it all goes together. So, which has been what we've said about the change grid all along. All these characteristics, these different levels of tension, travel as a set. So you don't get up-grid emotions and down-grid reasoning abilities. It's not the way it works. So yeah. So a good laugh, I'd like to think, if you look at the grid for just a second where I'm squiggling, I think it's kind of in between there. It is an expressive kind of a thing. Maybe a bit of a driver element, because, what made you laugh that hard? Someone took you somewhere. And as a result of whatever that journey was, whether it was a joke or, a reminiscing or whatever, something moved you to that. So I can kind of feel that it's a little bit up-grid, a little bit out-grid. Very far up-grid, nervous laughter, oh, and by the way, because this area, the change grid, is also where we find, do you remember I told you guys about when a human is in a situation where they do not feel they have the ability to meet the challenge, they substitute charm for ability. And so this is something, if we're looking at the whole courting ritual, you see that's going on. So you meet someone and you kind of like them, but you don't really know exactly what to do. There's always that kind of uneasiness. And so what do? You turn on the charm. And one of the things that happens from a laughter perspective when you're turning on the charm is giggling might occur, or a little just, those kinds of little, we call them the Hallmark giggle. If you guys have watched any Hallmark movie, Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's if you and once I point this out, you're going to know this. People in Hallmark movies, if you want to be an actor or an actress in Hallmark, you must perfect the Hallmark giggle.
Yeah.
And that means just out of the blue, you got to be able to go. It's like you just go like that would never happen in regular conversation. That's a Hallmark giggle. So yeah. Okay, so I can kind of see that sort of thing would happen up here. I do believe that people certainly laugh down grid, but you know that whole laughter that's happening inside of your head and it's not so much a full-on belly laugh? I think that's the kind of, we find things very humorous down grid. But maybe this is more where, what's that humor? Not sarcasm,
Dry humor.
puns. What was that, Kathy?
Dry humor.
Yeah, dry. Yeah, exactly right. Who's the comedian? Who's the king of the somber single thoughts? Not. Don't go all the way back to Henny Youngman. Most of the Henny Youngman, was that his name?
No, I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name though.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, right. You don't give me any respect.
Oh,
Rodney Dangerfield. Okay, that dates all of us. That dates all of us. But no, I think it's Stephen Wright.
Yeah, Stephen Wright. That's what I was trying to.
So he stands up and he just delivers this, this one little line, and I've never seen more than one entire facial expression in his repertoire. But he can move somewhere on the grid. It's not that deep belly laugh. It's an intelligent kind of a puzzle, and so I think it's more requiring someone to be of an analytical nature. You know how people talk about the difference between American humor and British humor. I think British humor requires a little bit more of an analytical contributor to being able to really, process it, understand it, get the joke,
Yes.
or whatever. And so I think that a certain kind of laughter could occur anywhere on the change grid, like in the outgrid danger zone. Can you hear the evil person bent on world domination could have that sinister evil laugh?
Mm-hmm.
And I can certainly think that someone who's up in a fight or flight response, that again, it's nervous laughter, but nevertheless, they go like, I have no idea why I'm laughing. The energy's got to come out one way or another. Okay, so and when we talk about someone who's really crying, is there any place on the change grid where you would not expect, oh, by the way, I would not expect to see laughter in the exact center of the change grid other than that little semi-smile that comes to your face, like the Mona Lisa smile, just that smile where you're kind of acknowledging, I know the world, or I know, I see it, I get it. So it's really more of an observant sort of moment of self-satisfaction or something like that. And even then, I don't know that I'm describing the exact center.
My friend calls out the cosmic chuckle.
The cosmic chuckle. There you go. Yeah. So that I go, but deep on full belly laughing, that's not the center of the change grid. Likewise, I don't think I'm going to find an outright cry in the center of the change grid. I think there might be an awareness of the suffering of others. But again, the center of the change grid is about practicing the art of caring detachment. The moment we start feeling that emotion, we are now attached. And so while that puts us someplace that's just fine, wherever it puts us on the change grid, it's moved us off center. It's moved us off center. Yeah.
What about in grid? Would there ever be laughter in grid?
I think that there could be, well, we'll throw it to everybody else. Do you think people that are in grid, and part of the answer is going to be based on how far, but are they where in grid would you find laughter, and what might that laughter, how might you characterize that laughter?
I can see a cynical laughter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah, but I kind of moved here a little bit down because,
okay.
well, cynicism requires an element of analytical ability. So I would say here I think is cynical, but yeah, I could still have a nice little cynical laugh anywhere right around here. What other characteristics tell me more about in-grid laughing?
That's an interesting question. Would it be a laugh or would it be kind of like a, what do you call it, smirk or
A
something like that?
smirk.
That was what I
Work
was
is
going
more
to say.
analytic, I think.
Yeah, smirk is down here too. That requires a little bit of a
Yeah,
judgment is being made. So,
I got you.
yeah.
Oh,
Well, how about this? If I said, well, we know that the primary energy, the in-grid quadrant, is the amiable energy. What's most important to an amiable? If we looked at that from at the personality type level, what's most important to an amiable?
Getting along.
Getting
getting along.
along, getting
Yeah.
along. And so, in the name of getting along, what kind of laughter might you encounter with a person in grid?
So that would be something soft, yes. That's
Soft. Yeah.
kind of quiet so that you don't disturb them. Because like if you're
Right.
doing a belly laugh, you might just like, people might be like, okay, let me
Yeah.
get away from the
Yeah.
person.
Put yourself in a restaurant. You know where there's an expressive laughing in the restaurant. When an amiable is laughing, what do you think that looks like? What do you think that sounds like?
Chuckle.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
There's
The
a smile.
word.
Not yeah, a lot of sound, but a smile.
A smile. The word that came to mind for me was it's a polite laughter. It's a
Okay.
polite chuckle. You know, they're giving you this form of feedback as a way of acknowledging you. They might not even get the joke, but they will have that pleasant little, polite little sort of smile on their face and little chuckle kind of thing that goes on. A lot of Hallmark chuckle is there too.
I would call that the royal laugh.
The royal laugh, yes, of course. It's
You have
expected.
to be proper, right? You have to be
It's
proper.
it's proper. It's expected, right? You don't want them to feel like they've misbehaved, so you have to laugh at their otherwise unforgivable faux pas. So yeah, it's almost a laugh of pity. So all
My
right, so
father was into that kind of stuff because of his job with the World Health Organization. So we always had to be on our best behavior. I'm like,
oh
man,
yeah,
we're a kid. We're supposed to have fun.
no,
And he's
you're
like,
not.
no, you guys have to be quiet and sit still. Like, what kid you know sit still?
Hey, you live in the state house, so
Right.
you're working.
That's
So, oh, it's hysterical. By the way, just little side note, but I was looking up Brian because I wanted to know what when I was listing people um, on the Circle of Brilliance copy, so I knew what to put after their name, and so I looked him up, and I knew he had roots in Jamaica, and he's got roots in South Africa. So I'm looking all over the place. There is someone named Brian Sykes, who is, what did we figure out he was?
He's a Supreme Court justice in Jamaica.
A Supreme Court, and I kind of went like, Brian, is your father also Brian Sykes? And is he a Supreme Court justice in Jamaica? And apparently the answer is no. So there you have it. There you have it. So I thought, wow, we have royalty in our flock. So, okay. Yeah, so I think laughter can occur anywhere on the change grid. So we have to kind of look at what is really the type of laughter, the emotion of laughter. But that breathing pattern, in theory, when it comes to that true belly laughing, is going to be more up grid and out grid. And that whole crying, sobbing, emoting kind of thing, more up grid and out grid is where that would be. Okay, now we've been shifting a couple of things over here downgrid. So a downgrid maneuver. If I wanted to say to a client, if I wanted to help a client move downgrid, what breathing might I tell them to go right ahead and do right then? So they're up in stress. Tell me what kind of breathing advice you would give them in the moment.
Well, deep belly breathing, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Slow breath.
Yeah, deep, slow breathing. Yeah, we talk about this all the time. Take 3 deep cleansing breaths. Hold it, now you get to the middle of the grid and you go, like, if you want to stay in the middle, you want to balance your breathing, do block breathing, whatever it happens to be. As we move down grid, I think that the whole breathing pattern for sleep involves very long, slow expiration and a little bit quicker inhale. Is 742. Do you guys remember the numbers, or am I just making this up as I go along?
I think short and let's see. I think one stimulates the sympathetic nervous system and one stimulates the parasympathetic, and then just
So yeah, fast versus slow inhalation, fast versus slow exhalation. It's
right.
supposed to be massaging the entire nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is to linger on the calming. So that would be lingering on the parasympathetic or,
Yes.
yeah.
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 So
So the
sympathetic is more active, parasympathetic is more passive.
Right.
So the
Yeah.
intake would be shorter. You know, you might do four counts on intake and 7 counts on the.
Right. And that moves you further and further down grid. And I think that's important because if we just say, okay, before I start telling people to modify their breathing as a change grid maneuver, what's very important? 2 questions I need to have answered before I start giving them advice about breathing. Anyone know the 2 questions?
Where are they now?
Where are they now? And
Where do they want to go?
where are we trying to move them? These are the 2 things. Before I do any kind of change grid maneuver, I don't care if it's breathing, conversational, it's really necessary to know, well, where are we starting from and where are we going to? And so I get it. If I just,
genius, you know.
yeah. Well, I'll give you an example because of a breathing pattern you shared with Brian.
Right.
Your goal was not to move him down to apathy.
No.
But isn't that interesting that that one breathing technique, based on where he was starting from,
Yes.
had such a relieving impact on him that he's in the midst of a snooze fest.
Yeah. Yes. It's. I don't know anyone else who. I mean, very few people I know who actually move into that. So that was interesting to hear him say that. It certainly
Yeah.
doesn't.
And I think it's because of, anything as it relates to the body, we train ourselves to be a certain way.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So like I am on the go literally until it's time for me to lie down and sleep. Like literally I'm on the go and I prefer it that way. And I've been doing that for over 30 years. And so that's just the way I know to go. So when I slow down, that's my nemesis, is finding time to actually relax and disengage. So when I did that breathing exercise, I was like, okay, I think I need a nap. Like it really just disrupted my entire pattern. And I'm used to it now.
Right. Well, I bring it up just to say that, okay, the verb from chemistry is that you have to titrate the
Exactly.
amount of the reagent you're introducing. And so I think
Right.
that when we tell people they're up in stress and we say to them, all right, I want you to do all this deep, thorough yoga kind of breathing, we may very well overshoot the destination.
Yeah.
Where if we just wanted to get them out of that immediate stress response, we might just take one deep breath, let it go, big exhale. That's all we need, one big exhale. And that could be enough to achieve the movement we're looking for. So as I was seeing what's available out there in Google World about breathing, I was a bit dismayed to find out that everything, and I mean it, if you go looking, everything you're going to find is going to focus entirely upon or strongly emphasize these kind of, I'll call it yogic breathing, but meditative breathing, that sort of
Which is why
mindfulness
I
breathing.
wanted us to do this, because I know a lot of that. I don't need to learn that. What I wanted to learn was more of what we're talking about. How do you shift? How do you move somebody to another space where they need?
Right. And so everything's being written about moving people to the center. And from an Oracle of the Self perspective, how terrifically handy.
Yeah.
But for all of us, I think that that's nothing more than a rehash of what we already know.
Yeah.
I want to know, how do I move people other directions?
That's right. Yeah.
So if I've got someone who is in power, but they maybe mid-grid, maybe slightly out-grid, I want them to step into courage. I want them to take that chance. They're prepare and get out there, go do whatever it is that needs to be done. What kind of breathing guidance might we want to give someone in order to move them into that action state?
You want to accelerate their breathing slightly, not a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but somehow or another deep breathe, but accelerate it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the exact breath, what it would be, but maybe a faster in breath, a couple of fast in breaths, and faster, shorter out breaths than you would for.
Yeah, it's exactly what I use in martial arts to execute on a strike. That's how we were taught to breathe. That's the exact pattern what you just described.
Oh,
Well,
good.
and I'll share with you that my sport was fencing. And in fencing, before you're about to, do your little lunge and hopefully get your point or whatever, there is a very specific breath that you're supposed to take. And so I'll give you the words, and if you ever see me, I'll demonstrate it for you. But you do this thing with your feet that's advanced. It's doing a forward click step. So you move your right foot slightly forward, and then when you snap, he leads by the heel. When you snap your toe down, you move your back foot right up against your front foot. And then you do that again, and you do that again. So it's always advance, advance, advance. And then the lunge is this giant leap forward. And if you do the 3 advances followed by the lunge, you can move your entire body from your rear heel to the tip of your sword. You can move yourself 15 feet. Your stretch 15 feet in those very slight little movements. Well, there is a breathing pattern associated with that, and it's puff, 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 blow. So it's, and then it's explosive. But the challenge for fencing is that the way that you detect that your opponent is about to attack is by watching their breathing, listening for their breathing. Because the one thing that you never want to do with your opponent is telegraph what you're about to do. Same thing in martial arts. So the only difference is that I have a weapon in my hand. And yeah, so it's that same kind of thing. To move ourselves into that action, into that attack kind of posture, we got to build up enough energy and enough air so that we can explode with something that's forward.
And you know what's central to that, what you just brought up, is this idea of when you talk about the feet positioning, because we do something similar in martial arts, and they call it grounding. So you get grounded first. Then you can better execute, because if you're not grounded and you execute, you're going to fall over, and that immediately changes your breathing pattern.
Oh, right. Yeah, and in fencing, depending on which event you're in, I competed in foil. In foil, you can only move forward and backwards. There is no sideways movement. You're on a track that's not even 2 feet wide. And so you can only click your feet forward. You can scoot your feet back, but it's all forward and back. A very lopsided sport, I have to tell you. It messes up your leg proportions. You end up with one giant thigh and one that's kind of going like, what happened there? So yeah, anyway. So I go like, okay, well, if I wanted to say to someone, I want you to move out grid, I would say to them, this is what I want you to do. Now, let's, instead of saying, here's what we want them to do breath-wise, what would you say to them to do as far as postures go that would then bring on that breathing pattern? So how do we tell people to step into confidence?
Shoulders.
Stand
up.
Stand up straight.
Straight.
Shoulders.
Head up. Face on. Well, if you adopt that posture, and then the only caution is that posture, if you stay right there, are you going to be more chest or abdominal breathing? Shoulders back, chest out, head forward, straight spine, good alignment. What do you think? Is that likely to lead more towards abdominal breathing or chest breathing?
Abdominal.
Interesting, because when I experience it, I experience it as chest unless I tell myself to relax my abdomen.
Well, what Brian was talking about, if you're centering, your center is below the belly button, and that's where when you're really fully centered and most resilient, that's where your weight and focus is. So,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And in fact, based on what Edie just said, she's right there in the middle. It's like it's not this far out grid part that would move you up to chest, but we're just saying like, no, we're just stepping into engagement. I can feel my abdomen just saying that, and I'm kind of moving around, changing my posture as I'm going through this description as well. I felt my abdomen relax. In fact, I exhaled. and I just felt the whole thing kind of moved. So yeah, so I think that there are things that we can do to help people move out grid based on posture. But I would wonder, is changing their posture what's changing their state? Or is it the fact that their posture has been changed, their breathing has changed, and the breathing is what changes their state?
I think it's the breathing, because that's what affects all the internal components, the neurotransmitters, the, you know, everything that's going on, all your body chemistry. Your breathing, I think, impacts that more than the posture does. That is, I mean, I'm guessing, you know, and this is a non-physical guess.
Yeah, but I think that that's got some really great insight to it, because well, and you guys say this as well, is it possible for someone to move into a posture and not have their breathing change? Can I get you to fake a posture and not have the breathing change? Is that even, come on, docs, is that possible? I don't even know.
I'll take a shot at it. I think you, when you stand up straight and increase your lung capacity, when you're not hunched over, then you have to fill everything up. It's like if you stand up but your heart isn't, either your blood volume is low or your heart rate doesn't pick up, your blood just pools in your feet and you faint. And that's that's just a physiological pooling of the blood. And same thing if you stood up really straight and tall, and you didn't take some deep breaths to support that that movement into that posture, you might feel lightheaded and and not be able to maintain or sustain that posture. I'm guessing. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say that's exactly right. Because the elements of the physiological, it's identified in the brain stem respiratory circuits. And so when people are hunched over, their head is moved forward, exactly what Jane was describing, I think will happen quite naturally. It's almost like, what is that saying? Attention goes or energy goes or something like that.
Well,
yeah.
Form follows function.
Right. I think it has I see that akin to that, what we're talking about here. So when your body's long and it's open, then everything's, their capacity for lung exposure and aspiration, exploratory kinds of things happen. And likewise, in a fetal position, if you think about it, you're shortening things. Because I tell you, they studied this in infants. The heart rate variability was often studied in infants in terms of their health. And I know that from being a preemie baby, where I spent the first 8 months of my life in an incubator.
Oh my.
Yeah.
How much did you weigh at birth?
4 pounds, 4 ounces.
And how early were you?
I forget exactly, but it was way too early. That's why I was born in Jamaica and not South Africa, so I disrupted everyone's vacation.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I just want to throw, go ahead, Edie.
I think it goes both ways. I think your posture will affect the breathing, and the breathing, there again, I think it's a two-way street. But I've had people slump over and talk, and they talk very depressed. So I've done things experimenting with posture, and their breathing, their voice, their the tempo, everything changes. And so if they take a slump posture, they talk like a depressed person. But the other thing I want to comment on, because it goes way back, is when you said something about, I love it, that people substitute charm for ability.
Yep.
That was a great statement, but that's something right brain people do well. I do that really well. I never get a ticket because I can charm with my ability.
Right.
But I want to just say, left brain people really succumb. They tend
Yeah.
not to be able
Right.
to do that. So I just
No.
want to say that. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right, because the left brain person is going to be more like, I need more logic. I can't answer the question.
Yeah.
Winging it is not what they're,
Mhm.
not in their wheelhouse. I know we're at the top of the hour, but I think we can finish this discussion just a couple of minutes, because I only had one other thing I wanted to throw out, because going back to moving people around. Imagine how often we encounter someone who's really stressed out and we say, come over here, have a seat. Come over here, have a seat. Or you just need to sleep on it, or whatever. It's almost like we're saying to these people, adopt more down-grid postures. Whether that's seating, whatever it is, just adopt a more down-grid posture, and you're going to move down-grid. Well, did you move down-grid because you sat down? Maybe, but did you move downward because when you sat down, your breathing changed? So I'm trying to think what's really driving the bus here. And I think if nothing else, the breathing is a co-pilot. I've changed my vehicle, but nevertheless, my my breathing is really a very powerful element of that. So I think that we are already good about moving people to a centered place. I think we know how to move people out grid. We know how to move people down grid. Do we know how to move people up grid? So now, not out grid, but up grid. If I wanted to actually awaken feelings of anger, grief, fear, shame, I don't know why I'm trying to do that, but what kinds of things would you do if that was your objective? And I guess I'm babbling, because really, I think the only thing any of us should get good at is moving people who are too far down grid to the center of the change grid and then move them out grid. Or maybe we would go more direct from down grid to out grid. I also think that we might want to take people who are too far up grid, move them to center and out, or directly from up grid to out grid. I can see all those. I can't think of a time in our work that we would want to move someone from the center of the change grid up grid. You know, and the other thing I think about is, like, they're not at their threshold of activation. Let's say I'm not trying to move them all the way up into the danger zone. I'm just trying to move them up a little bit so they hit their threshold.
Valuable. I think that can be valuable for people who tend to want to stay in the center, and
yeah, I think you can be just really enthusiastic. Haven't you ever seen someone that gets you enthusiastic too? And so sometimes I will get that feedback on my talks. They say, oh, I really like this because of the enthusiasm. And so I think that's, we talk about enthusiasm being infectious and contagious.
That's true. So enthusiasm, and I think that one of the things that came up was about having a more positive facial expression. So I was going to say smiling, but it doesn't necessarily be smiling. It just has to be more animated.
Yeah, animated.
Something like that. I can see that would move someone up grid enough to get them a bit more engaged, if that's what I was trying to do. But I don't really know that in the scope of ethical work that we should intentionally make people gasp and hyperventilate and snort.
One of the things, let me just, one of the things that I do to help people move to a point where they're taking action is to have them do what you do for people with PTSD, which is bilateral movement, bilateral walking, but moving, not sitting, not just tapping, but walking with intention, so that they are focused on something and they are moving bilaterally and getting their cells kind of activated and getting their body in a frame.
Well, interestingly enough, what you've just said is exactly what our little heart rate variability monitor keeps telling at least me and Ellen, and that is that we are exhausted. We need to get moving.
Well, and T, have you looked into what he sent, that little paper on Takatina?
Yes. Yes.
That's a whole bilateral movement kind of thing, because you go on one side and the other, and then you do these other routines. First it's with your feet, then it's with your hands, and you're also talking nonsense syllables, and they go from different aspects of the way you speak, from the front of the mouth to the back. And
some coaches do that. It's all about bilateral movement when you want to get somebody going.
Yeah. Are you familiar with that, Takatina, Kathy?
I know I'm not. I mean, I know not at all, but I do that. One of the books that's interesting to read, if you're all interested in this, written by somebody who works with PTSD, because I've done a lot of, not that I'm not a psychologist, but I happen to have people I have coached who have had PTSD. And so I've had to study, you know, how to, and I've done it for myself. You know, when I want to activate myself, there's a book called Walking Away the Blues that I highly recommend. And it is really fantastic because and I've learned this through other methods, is create an intention. You know, where do you want to be? What visualize where you want, and I do this with the people I coach all the time, those who need it. Visualize where you want to be and go take a vigorous walk, where you're moving your arms, you know, and it's not, you're not running, you're just moving your arms and walking and staying focused on the vision of where you want to be, and it will activate you in a certain direction.
Wow.
Yeah, and see, and that makes really good sense when we say, like, all right, you just got to get off your butt, get moving, get in action. Even those little simple things,
Right.
and that shouldn't surprise us, because we define tension as the level of physical, emotional, and intellectual activity. So if I can just get you to be more physically active, which equals just move, then your level of tension is going to go up.
But it's not just, I mean, if you're moving someone into power, it's not just moving, it's moving with intention.
Well, I agree completely. And I think too that even if I'm moving someone from power up to power stress, where there's just so they hit their threshold, I still very much have this idea in mind about where am I going? Why am I moving someone there? And then I get there and I go like, well, what is that breathing pattern like? And maybe all I could say is that, well, it is faster because they're moving. I don't know if it's deeper or more shallow. I guess it depends on how much they're moving, and what kind of movement they happen to be doing. But I think there's going to be some characteristics in breathing again that will change because we have changed what they're doing physically.
I would say that the goal would be to balance the breathing, as we were saying, in power as much as possible. You want to encourage them through the straight posture and the slightly forward movement to just, and continue to be aware of breathing, not deeply into their abdomen, but just staying in a, you know, allowing
a relaxed, full kind of.
Yeah. So you're not, you know, you're, but
because
Margaret Mead talks about disengaging the cerebral cortex, and that's why people say, I'm going to take a walk and think it over, because it disengages it and gets us into you know, another brainwave activity where there is actually more kind of a subconscious power that will root it.
Yeah, I'll share a quick story with you guys, and then I think we can be bringing this to closure. But I have two godchildren who are half Jamaican. Their grandparents live in Jamaica. They're probably retired by now, but they were the superintendent of schools and headmistress and whatever. So they're very established in this in the educational kind of sector. And so one of the things that I learned is about how they raise their kids. And one of the things they do is, like, if a kid does something wrong, they don't get, you know, punished publicly and all that. That's not it. In fact, the kid's most dreaded thing to hear their grandparents say to them is, "Walk with me." And that's all. You're going to go for a walk and you're going to have a talk. It's like the kids just go like, why can't people just hit me? Why can't no, and I got to. So yeah, so Brian, did you have to go on walks
with my grand? Yeah, my grandfather, that was his thing, because like say my relationship with my father was just really, he's type A personality. He passed away in his 62. My grandfather lived to be 102. So
Wow.
when I always tell my grandfather, you know, father's being a disturbance, his thing is like, no, you are disturbed. But he said, let's go for a walk. You know, let's talk about this. And I'm always trying to get him to take my side, and he would never do that. He would just use the power of inquiry to get me to see that no one forced you to be in that state that you're in. That's a choice. And it says,
He was a very wise man, Brian.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
It's interesting what we're kind of talking about now, though, is the power of movement, because certainly I can see how walking could be a downgrid maneuver, because now you're taking a break, you're escaping from it, you're being able to separate, you know, dissociate. But walking could also be an upgrid maneuver, depending on where you're starting from. And so is movement in and of itself a ChangeGrid maneuver? And if so, what types of movement will take you where? Maybe that's something we should spend a session looking at.
I'm a believer in, and I've been exploring that as well, because I do a lot of movement kinds of practices with people with coaching, and so I would love to be doing them rather than through instinct.
Yeah, well, it sounds to me like our dialogue has moved from breathing into movement. So how about if on Tuesday at least we make the focus more on the movement side of things, because one follows the other, right? I move and then I breathe, or do I breathe and then I move? I mean, I'm always breathing, I'm not always moving. So again, we just got to try to figure out, if I really want to equip a person to become a better self-manager of their thoughts, of their attention, of their results. Is it more about movement training, breathing training, mindfulness training, or is it all of these things? All of these things. But then the question becomes, which one is most accessible at a particular moment in time? Like, for example, when we used to talk about PowerPoint maneuvers, and people would say, well, a great PowerPoint maneuver for me is that I just need to take a 15-minute nap. Well, what if you can't do that in the circumstances you're in? So we need to give people multiple tools to help them move themselves from wherever they are on the ChangeGrid to wherever they would be better served, that allow them to have something at their disposal, no matter what the circumstances are. So sometimes that might be movement, sometimes that might be breathing. Yep.
I think it would definitely help. I like the stuff that Jane is doing now with the embodiment leadership, because I've been doing some of that training, attending some of those seminars. And I think that's what this does for me, the breathing, the movement. People don't know how to reconcile things that they actually embody, because they're, quite frankly, just simply not aware of it. And I think the more people become aware of it, they can move towards that reconciliation.
Exactly what I've been talking about is when I talk about it's about
I think learning how to center in 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions is really useful, because you can do it in 3 breaths or 4 breaths. And it's both a posture and breathing, and you can do it without anybody else really knowing that you're doing.
Yeah. Okay, anywho, lovely talking to all of you guys. We will pick up on Tuesday and go from there. So thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.